Okay, so welcome all. On behalf of itSMF Slovensko, I would like to welcome you to our common international webinar. The topic is service request management, and subtitle of what we figure out with Robert is, can service request management boldly go where no one has gone before? You are probably quite aware with this picture, so the topic is related even to this picture. So, okay, just to some administration topic, please during the webinar send us some Q&A, some questions through Q&A's feature in this Teams, and we will be able to answer them at the end of the webinar. Don't be shy, please give us any reasonable question. And I would like to introduce today's speakers. First of all, welcome Robert Edward Pennington, founder of PDCA Consulting. And Robert and me, we are both co-authors of this practice, service request management, and probably some of you probably knows me. My name is Miroslav Lovsky. I'm the, let's say, today coordinator of this webinar, and at the end we will be both with Robert even to answer your questions. So Robert, stage is yours, and welcome here in Slovakia.
Well, thank you very much, Miroslav, and thank you very much to itSMF Slovensko for inviting me to co-host this with my co-author Miroslav. If we look at the agenda that we're going to take you through, we've already done our introductions, and I'd like to discuss a little bit on the evolution of ITIL and the service request management practice within ITIL, and then look somewhat at the service value system and the service value chain, how they came into play in ITIL 4 to enable us to do better service request management and in fact a enterprise-wide service management system. We're going to look a little bit at some of the stuff that Miroslav and I wrote for the service request management practice and some of the ITIL guiding principles, and I'm going to wind up with how not to do things, and then I'm going to hand over to Miroslav, who'll do the reactive service request management versus proactive service request management, which is where we think we should be heading for the future, and moving forward and boldly going that way. And then Miroslav's going to show some practical application of some supported service management tools, and then we can do some Q&A in the last 20 or so minutes of the presentation. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the evolution of ITIL and how it first started back in the 1980s, when I'm sure a lot of you were still at school, or perhaps some of you weren't born. But I was working by that time, and then within the 90s, it had already become a globally recognized best practice. By the 2000s, the OGC completely rewrote it for version 2, and then we got the 2 books for service delivery and service support. And then within the 2010s, we got version 3, and then finally version 4, where we introduced the service value system. Now, what does that mean for the evolution of service request management? Well, before the start of this century, there wasn't really anything in ITIL that reflected service request management. It really wasn't classified as anything separate. One dealt with any service request as some form of incident, and in fact I've been in organizations where even requests for new accounts were classified as a form of an incident. By 2007 this started to be addressed, and we got the service request fulfillment process within ITIL version 3, but there was no clear link with any sort of service catalog management or service request catalog or anything like that. When we got to version 2011, we got 5 sub-processes. There was links and interfaces between the incident management and service transition, but still it wasn't fully there, because one of the things they were missing, which was introduced in ITIL version 4, was the idea of a request catalog. So you build a catalog for all the different types of service requests that you might need, and that's when we can then start building on that, and we can start looking at enterprise-wide service management and improvements to like links with event management and configuration, and building a better idea of a user experience and a customer journey. And part of that is illustrated by the ITIL version 4's service value system, where you're actually starting off with an opportunity or a demand from your customer base and your user base, and ending up building some sort of value. We focus on value. It's one of the guiding principles. And while we look at the guiding principles and the continual improvement, we also need to take into account our best practices, especially in this case for service request management, and the governance of your whole ITIL framework. And we can focus now into what that means for the service value chain. And if you look at this diagram, you may have seen this in the ITIL brochures, and the color coding here is the darker the color, the more involvement this particular process has with that particular building block of the service value chain. And what we're really trying to emphasize here is that engagement with your user base and your customers to be able to build a service request management process and system that actually delivers what your people want. And it's a holistic delivery. We look at where you should start from the demand and how you're actually going to deliver that value. So one of my favorite things is to talk about an account building process. And an awful lot of organizations just say, well, I've got a request to build an account. I need to create an account for a new user. But that's not really adding that much value for your organization, because at the end of the day, that user is going to need a device of some form. They're going to use some form apps. They're going to have some sort of permissions on those apps. And just looking at that as a one individual component part is not what we're really talking about within ITIL 4. We're looking at the whole value chain, what the customer is demanding and what they actually need in order to finally do some work. And something we looked at quite a lot when we were writing the service request management best practice was some definitions. And what actually is a service request? Well, it's a request from a user that initiates a service action that's a normal part of service delivery. It's not an incident. It's a standard thing that you can deal with within a service request model. So it's a repeatable, predefined approach. That's what your service request model is. And that reflects in the best practices from the P3 M3 model, where we talk about an initial way of doing something, and then we can make sure that we can repeat doing it, and then we can define it and build it into your service request catalog, at which point you can then start managing it, and then you can optimize it, and you can improving, use the continual improvement process to improve your service request management process. And part of, as well as having your request model, you should have a request catalog. So it's a catalog of all the different service requests that you're going to deliver. And one should look at that in terms of a service and not as the component part that makes up that service. So not just build an account, deliver a device, give them some apps, but the whole thing. And why do we think that was important? Because when we looked at the practice success factors, we wanted to make sure that all the services are optimized and that they fulfill the agreed need for your user base and make sure that your users are satisfied. There's no point in giving somebody a device if they can't charge it. There's no point in giving them a device if there's no apps on it. It doesn't make any sense. We want to, move to the future, make sure that we're actually proactively providing something for those users. And I think that's emphasized an awful lot in the different guiding principles of ITIL. And there's 7 guiding principles. We've got them displayed here. We're not going to look at each one, but we're just going to look at, we're going to focus on the optimize and automate, and then how that plays in with the other guiding principles and how we can use them in order to build a more proactive functioning request management system that enables us to do more of a enterprise-wide service management. So if we look at optimize and automate, what does that really mean? It's trying to use the resources to your best effect, get rid of anything that's truly wasteful, and use your technology to improve things. An awful lot of organizations, even if they do build some sort of process or request catalog, it's got too many steps in it. There's too many manual interventions. We do one thing and then we pass it on to another department that does something else, and another department that does something else. And there's also an obsession with getting things to be approved by some form of management level. And often I say, why do you need an authorization? The manager's hired this person to do a job. Why not just give them the tools to do the job? You don't need somebody to approve it. They've already approved the requirement for that device for those accounts for whatever this person needs by hiring them. You don't need to do it again. I hope that makes sense. Another guiding principle that's quite important when we're talking about improving your service request management is to progress iteratively. Do things, bit by bit. You're not going to improve the world in one huge go. You need to comprehend the whole, make sure you know the whole of what that request is going to be, or that's going to provide some value to your customers, but do it bit by bit. As an example, I used to work in an investment banking system where investment banking area, sorry, not system, where we had a service request management system where somebody could request a new device, but then that got passed on to an enterprise resource planning system that somebody had to enter it into to order that system, so it was purchased. Then we had another system for building that device. We had another system for recording which location that was in. We had another system for determining networks segments. So there's lots of different independent systems that individuals had to input things into, and it just didn't make any sense. So we built a series of interfaces between each one of those. So here we're using progressive iteratively. So we built the interfaces so that then we could speed the delivery and reduce the amount of delays due to manual intervention between those different systems, so that we delivered devices a lot quicker. And then once we'd done that, the other benefit of that was we could then reconcile these different systems, and we could work out if the relevant departments that were using these services were being charged appropriately, or if they were being overcharged or undercharged. And we had quite a considerable amount of benefit from doing that. And we went one step further, and we linked to the human resources system. So whenever there was a new hire, we got a trigger. Whenever that person had signed the contract, we got a trigger, and we started the whole train of producing and providing that new user who's going to join in like 2-3 months time, something on their desk so that they could start working day one, which was a massive improvement. Another thing that we focused on when we were writing the service request management best practice is that we should try and keep things simple and practical, reduce the number of steps, make sure anything that you do adds value. You know, another example that comes to mind is one organization one of us was working in had the requirement to deliver handies or telephones to their workers, and they had this massive catalogue of, you know, hundreds of different devices. They became impossible to manage. Nobody knew who had what. And if you simplify, reduce that to, say, a high-end telephone and a low-end telephone, it becomes a lot quicker to deliver. It becomes a lot cheaper to support. You can do your life cycle management a lot quicker because you've got less of a size of a catalogue to look at and manage. And this really comes into the next guiding principle that I really want to talk about is focusing on value. Make sure what service requests you have actually deliver value to your users. So you're thinking like holistically, that it's not just I've got a user who's got a request and you satisfy that one little request, when you know that request, once it's satisfied, is going to need another request or another request, because you know, you deliver a device, as the example that I gave earlier. You deliver a device, and a device, you need to put an app on it. You need some permissions on that. You need to then do some life cycle management on that at some stage and replace that device. So you can proactively work on building those scripts and links between each one of the steps, so that you do the whole thing and not just a tiny part of it. And as much as I've been criticising the way an awful lot of organisations do things, an awful lot of them are already doing things the right way. I've already got some successful practices in place, and so that they can. You should start from there. You should start where you are and seeing how you can improve iteratively each one of those different steps. Start trying to think, I hate the term, but outside the box. Why are we actually doing this step? Why are we approving something? Why do we need to get some permission to do something? Most of the time you don't need it. Why do you need to get somebody to take an input from one system to put it into another system? You don't need to do that. You can build scripts, you can build interfaces. We are in the 21st century. Things do work that way, and it becomes a lot easier to just link everything together. so that you should have a, you know, we recommend having a highly automated environment where each service request, you check all the prerequisites. This user is coming in and they're going to be working in this department, and so they'll require this sort of device or devices, these sort of accounts, these sort of permissions, and so that you can capture all that at the first stage and pass those through, you know, automated procedures, scripts, lots of other different tools, and which Miroslav is going to demonstrate later, that will speed the delivery of that service. Okay, and that's really what we're trying to push everybody. That's the way we think the world should start working. And so I'd like to emphasize how not to do service request management is a lot of places, they're like any sort of standards or specifications in the request catalog. They lack any sort of processes, not only an individual level, but a bulk process. Some organizations, you know, you'll take over another company and you'll suddenly get 100 new users, 1,000 new users to come in. If you've not thought about a bulk process and how you're going to deal with that, you're going to be swamped. Those new people are not going to be active within your organization for quite some time. And this is what I'm talking about. When we get, you know, you're going to be doing that, you should have triggers for different events that will trigger, and a script that will do another step in the whole service request process, so that you're delivering value to your users. And one of the things that a lot of organizations that are still not doing is they're not collaborating, they're not thinking holistically, they're all still in silos. You know, we've had the discussions about DevOps before and how that works. But if you're not breaking down those silos, which is one of the things that DevOps tries to do, but you're not going to be able to build a very good enterprise service management system. And finally, I think this is really showing the issue that we have, that we've got a lack of a focus on a customer journey. It's not the individual steps delivering tiny little service requests. You think about the whole thing. What does that customer need in order to be able to work? And I'd like to just wrap up by showing you something here, and why we were talking about how not to boldly go. When I was a very young man, well, a boy, I used to watch Star Trek, the original series, and one of the most futuristic things that I saw there was the way the doors opened. Nowadays, doors just open when you walk into a supermarket, but back in the 1960s, they didn't. Okay, and so when you saw this on the television, you thought, that's really impressive. But just like lots of service request management implementations where a user starts a request, they don't always go as smoothly as they'd expect. And this is something that happens in an awful lot of service request implementations. The doors just don't open, you know? People walk, they expect their request to go through, and it just fails. Some stop because some point because nobody has actually built the process properly. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Miroslav, who will show you how to make those doors open.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Okay, I tried to switch presentation. Robert, just mute yourself. I hear myself twice. Okay, last two topics which I want to present or speak about is the topic which we with Robert are thinking for the future for service request management, because what we see right now, mostly we are talking about so-called reactive service request management, and I will show you what I mean by reactive service request management. And we think that we can head it to the proactive service request management for the future, where the services for the users will be, let's say, something what can impress them, what can basically make a surprise for them and eventually make a better value for them. Um, I used some real examples from For Me solution. So I would like to, at the beginning, thanks to Michael Wilken from For Me. He's a service management architect at For Me, and he reviewed with me some real examples. So thank you, Michael, and I will continue even with your thoughts for the next slides. Okay, so let's back to the reactive service request management and what I mean by that. If we are talking about service request management, and Robert said that most part within the service request management is engage and then to deliver. And if we are talking about engage, it's some kind of portal. In the service request management practice, we define it like a request catalog, where you can find most of the requests or standard requests, standard service requests for the users, and user can just click to this request, fulfill what he wants basically, and then submit the request to the service provider. What begins after that? It's the processing or delivery of the request, and many of the good tools currently provides many options how to automate and how to track separate tasks for separate task within the fulfillment of the service request. And that's something what even the Robert said when we are talking about the not to fulfill just one task, but focus on the whole delivery for the user, which he needs to have, not just to grant access, but even deliver the PC and some other things which are basically the service request needs to be defined from the user perspective, not from IT perspective, to deliver some kind of task which basically cannot user have any value from that, because basically he cannot use something else because some other request needs to be submitted and so on. So this is something what is really common currently, and many tools currently support such a features, and current approach to the many implementation of the service request management are based basically on these two aspects: request portal or service request catalog, and the automation of the task which needs to be done to fulfill the request. But what we see for the future, and that's what we calling proactive service request management. Basically, if you think about some requests, we know that this request is needed for the user before he even needs to submit it through the portal. So if we are talking about this, we can use many interfaces and to trigger the service request instead of the user through many APIs. And currently, service management tools even for here you can see some examples of these APIs, and basically we can trigger the service request without any manual intervention of the user. Once such a request is submitted or triggered by some automation tools or some monitoring tools on whatever user do something before, then okay, the secondary thing is the same, to automate and to fulfill this request. What I want to even focus it's not only the possibilities to trigger request instead of the portals through API. You can even think about what kind of assets user have, and if this asset, for example, is at the end of the life cycle, for example, is quite obsolete, you can set up some triggers based on the user asset lifecycle and trigger, for example, replacement of the old laptop with the new one, even without the user involvement to submit such a request. That's even second example of the proactivity if in the service request management. Another one is what we call currently virtual agent, and I would like to show this as a real example. Let me give a short break to present a real demo from ForMe environment. And if you see this is some kind of demo environment, and I'm a log into the ForMe solution through some demo account, Arizona Barhus. And well, now here is some kind of feature of virtual agent. I want to reserve some kind of device, for example, something. So, well, I'm thinking that virtual agent can help me. So I will type reservation and just submit it. Virtual agent will know what kind of services are provided to me as a user or customer of the specific organization, and provide me some kind of, not even only the advice where I should click to read some kind of static article, but basically provide me to choose what I want to hire or reserve, for example, projector. Then I just to click in and then mark the date and time where I want to somehow, just give me a second. I confirm it before, therefore it's here. So basically you can generate some kind of request with some kind of not virtual agent, but virtual assistant, because it helps me to generate the request. Okay, so back to my presentation. That's about how the virtual agents help with some proactivity, with fulfillment, or with offering some requests. Now I can go further and looking to another things which are related to the processing of the requests. And as you can see here, some requests can be initiated from another workflow. So once the one workflow ended and some condition is fulfilled to generate another workflow for the specific reason, then it means even, and again, example of the proactivity that another workflow, another fulfillment is triggered by the previous one. Okay, automation to any another tools through webhooks. That's something what, if you are a specialist for the tool, you are probably familiar with webhooks. You can basically automate some things which previously has to be done by some technician. The automation now can trigger to fulfill this task without any touch of the technician. For example, software deployment is common example which can be done, and the service service management tool can trigger the deployment of the requested software and automatically install the software into the computer of the user. That's really something really proactive and really good to do. I have one really nice video about how even the relation between not only the request but services can do something proactive. And I would like to show you that, but let me give a short, because I didn't switch on the music, the sound. Now I did it. So hopefully you now will be able to not only see the example of these relation, really sophisticated relations between not only the request, but the services itself. And it's a really nice example from Estonia government, how they see this, the provisioning of the government services to the citizens.
Every person has a life timeline that is defined by key moments such as birth, going to school, graduating, getting a driver's license, starting a job, getting married, having a child, and much more. These moments are defined as life events, and they are divided into different life segments such as family, school, adulthood, and many others. Some events like accidents can also be without a specific segment. During these life events, the government is there to help you seamlessly get through any required processes. Let's take a closer look at one of those events, when you are acquiring a driver's license. After graduating from a driving school and once you are in possession of a valid health documents, you can apply for a driver's license. After that, you need to pass the theory exam, pass the driving test, and finally, you will receive your license. The Estonian Road Administration will help you throughout the whole process. Now let's take a look at a more complex life event, such as having a child. This time, the life event is divided into bigger stages, such as family planning, pregnancy, the birth of the child, and postpartum childcare. Each of these stages involves several public services. Let's call these event-based service sub-services. During the planning stage, these can be healthcare services. During the pregnancy stage, these can be planning parental leave and benefits. During the childbirth stage, acknowledging the paternity and naming the child. And during the postpartum childcare stage, receiving the appropriate benefits. Different institutions are responsible for the services that are relevant to them, but institutions are not bound to one specific life event stage. Instead, the services may be found in multiple stages, and if you need it, they will provide the help whenever it is needed. There are some actions that need to be initiated by the parent, but whenever possible, the institutions will proactively initiate any required processes to reduce the amount of work required from the parent. And of course, the institutions also share data with one another to make things move as fast as possible. If we combine these systems, then we can see an efficient data flow which helps the government to provide a new parent with easy to use and fast public services. But having a child is a two-person job, which means that this life event is not found on just one person's life timeline, but will also appear on the other parent's life timeline. The mother and father now share a connected life timeline, but that's not all. Once the baby is born, their life timeline begins, which will also be connected to the baby's parents. If we zoom out, we can see more families and life timelines that are all connected and form an expansive network with many different life events processed every day with the help of Estonian public services all over the country.
Okay, just brief comment to this. If you see this, some life events can be not only applied in government services, you can apply it even in your organization. For example, the onboarding of the new employee is such kind of life event thing which can trigger many service requests, and some of them can be applied not directly in the time of the once the employee firstly coming to the company, but can be triggered later on once the another requests are fulfilled. So in that moment, you can basically orchestrate your life in your organization through the requests, and nobody will forget with anything. So that's basically the idea of the proactive services and proactive service requests. Now let's switch to the Q&A session, right, Robert? Just unmute, and I will open the Q&A session. Okay, and if you don't mind, I will read the question, and then we can discuss about it, or you can answer it. Then I will add something or whatever. Okay, so Siegfried, the biggest showstopper for an optimal user experience is security. Password, anyone. Security does not bring value, it protects it.
I have to say I agree with Siegfried. But I don't quite understand why he thinks that creating an account and providing passwords is a showstopper. Because I think you can build those sort of processes in an automated fashion in a way that it doesn't stop you. I mean, if one looks outside if you to the outside world, you look at something like Amazon or any other delivery service, you can create an account with those organizations, and they're instantaneous. The delivery of that password and that setting of your password is delivered at the same time that you ask for that service, that application on your phone. So there's no reason why you can't deliver an optimized password process, I don't think.
Yeah, I need to agree in some point of view that it's some kind of obstacle, right? If I'm the user and I want to the smooth part, I would like to not put any let's say password to anywhere. But I'm quite impressed, for example, from some Slovak banks right now, and they are able to somehow manage this process of logging to my internet banking in the way that, for example, right now I don't need to my computer, which was before somehow authorized, to again put some kind of ID and password. They just ask me for some kind of PIN, right?
Yes.
It's a 4-digit number, and I can do it really fast and log in really smoothly. So if you rethink your let's say security policy and put there some kind of user experience aspect, then you can definitely find out the way how to do it smoothly, right?
Yeah, most certainly. You can have some form of device that is the authorizing device. So we know, for instance, most handies, mobile phones are individual to that one person, and then you can use a token from that device in order to authorize their access. You can do that in all sorts of organizations, and you know that if somebody is within your corporate network as a authorized user, then you can build like single sign-on processes so that they don't need to have access to a separate password or user ID to that second or third application that they might be using.
Good. Okay, I just realized that I didn't start it from the beginning, but no matter. Okay, I will start with the first question. That's anonymous question, but whatever. What do you do with service requests which are not predefined?
I mean, that's an interesting question. If we go back to slide 9 on the presentation, we say there within the service request management best practice a service request is something that's predefined, a normal part of service delivery. So I don't quite know how you can get a service request that isn't in the service catalog, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, fully agree. Once, okay, in ITIL 3, there was some kind of definition. If something is not predefined, let's handle it firstly as a change. And if you realize through the change process that it can be standardized, then excluded it from the change management and put it into the service request management. Fully agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree that if the standard change result in a service request in the catalog, it is followed, managed from within that practice and not in the change enablement practice?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused by that question. That could be read in a couple of ways. Is that somebody within the change management? They're doing some change management and they need an additional service. So they need access to some other device or database or whatever as part of their change.
Yeah,
or is that they're doing a change, they're transitioning something into the production environment that then generates a new item or new type of service within the service request catalog. I mean, if it's something that generates something new in the service request catalog and it's a new service, then one would say that that is part of service request management, obviously. But if it's a developer working in their change process, they're developing something new, but they need some new access to something, then that's part of the service request process, not part of the change process. Because I would say that what they're asking for is something that's a standard predefined request.
Yeah, maybe what I'm thinking this person is asking is the similarity between, because in change enablement, standard change is even defined as something really well known in before and with the known process how to handle this standard change, and there is really blur line between service request and the standard change in some way, in some situation. What I would like to highlight is that, okay, if the standard change is something what can be published to the broader audience as something what they can receive, then handle it through request management and publish it to the request catalog, right? That's my point of view. Okay, what about the request for information? Are they dealt that way too?
Yeah. I wonder what they mean by a request for information. What sort of information? Because if you're getting lots of requests for a certain type of information, then surely you can build that into your request catalog. Perhaps there's a requirement for a reporting tool of some form.
What might be the question is that users sometimes not want something, but seeking for some kind of advice, where to find something and so on. Basically, such a process you cannot automate.
No.
Right? Because you don't know in the beginning what is the topic and how to automate this topic. But what I present in previous slide, these virtual agents basically really helps, because you don't need to in the beginning to spend some really expensive time of the service agent to ask him something, but just type it into the virtual agent box on your front end on your portal, and if the virtual agent is not able to give you proper advice, then ask the agent, right? So there's some kind of way how to handle requests for information in a specific ways.
Yeah, there are specific ways. I mean, it depends on how much knowledge management you've got behind your service request management system or your enterprise management service desk. I mean, sometimes the requests for information about how do I do a certain thing. And I think an awful lot of those requests where people are asking, how do I do this, are because the user experience isn't well defined enough or customer focused enough to make it simple for them to do that. And you might get a demand, I need a new server, for instance, something big, something complicated, which requires lots of different steps. And if you haven't built that customer focused journey on, here's a demand, I need a new server, and here are all the different steps in between, but I need to ask for this information right at the beginning, lots of different bits of information before you can deliver that server, you're going to have lots of requests for information. How do I do this? How do I do that?
Correct. And I like to highlight that in that case, in the case of request for information, this practice is really depending on your good knowledge management process or practice, right? Because otherwise you cannot provide right information or knowledge. Good. Another question, any limitation in lead time or included steps in the predefined services in the catalog? We have service of physical building projects with months of lead time and hundreds of activities. Wow. I'm not sure if this is something what can be handled as a service request, right? That's my point of view.
Well, I mean, it depends on what the project is, but at some stage, for instance, you might be building a new office space, and who's going to move into that office space. So you could have a trigger to deliver the access for a certain set of users into that office space that you're going to deliver in 6 months' time.
Yeah,
and,
but
go back to your example of Estonia, Miro. Then we saw these life events generating items within the Estonia system. So so a couple gets married, and then they have a baby, and that baby's going to go to kindergarten, and they're going to go to school, and then they're going to have a driver's license and all this sort of stuff. So
but basically, all these requests should be user focused, right? Not focused I don't know what exactly is this project, or what does it mean, these physical building projects, but basically it should be some kind of person related or user related requests, not as to build some building, right? As a request or something like that. I don't know exactly. We need further information about this topic.
Yeah. You wouldn't say build a building as build a new house as a service request. Or change, I'd say.
I would.
Within that building project, there is going to be a need to deliver some services, isn't there?
Yes, definitely. I would highlight some connection or interfaces between the project management and some standard service requests, because basically through the project you can initiate to some standard service requests to help to fulfill the project, right? Mm-hmm. That's common things which can be used basically. Okay.
You've got new projects. You're going to have a whole bunch of people building that project. If we're talking about building buildings, you're going to have bricklayers, electricians, plumbers, and they're all going to need some form of access to that building site, aren't they? And that you've got a whole bunch of vendors who are going to be providing those different people that are going to be on your building projects, so you can proactively trigger the creation of those the access for those people onto the site.
Sure. Okay. Next one. George, can you describe a useful clue how to differ changes and service requests, please, from point of view end user view, not ITIL expert. Smile.
Oh, well, I'd say a change is something completely new that you don't already do, whereas a service request is something that's predefined that you already do. I think that's the simplest way of explaining that. Even though both result in some form of change to the environment that you're working in, a change is something new. It's never been dealt with before. Whereas, you know, providing a telephone, well, we've done that before, so that's a service request. Providing any other devices or access to a building is something we've done before, and therefore it can be predefined. We can build the different processes around it, and we can put that into the request catalog. Whereas a change, I would say, is something that's completely new that we've never done before.
Yeah, fully agree. And I would like to highlight some really simple examples. If I'm the user and I want something to add to my computer, new software and application, it's user-related service request, which can be really easy to done, easy to automate, and even predefine the way how to fulfill it, right? But if I want to, for example, upgrade the operational system for all the computers in the organization, probably this won't be service request, right?
Yeah, not really.
There is a really big risk to do that as a simple request. So according to
but
this,
in terms of automation, when you taking back to your example of a user wanting some new software on their device, okay, an awful lot of organizations, the person has to request that from the service desk. The service desk then send that to some form of local IT person. That person then finds out the name of that the requester's device, then gets the name of the software, and then goes and runs some form of command in order to install that application on that person's device. Whereas, you know, if you're doing an optimized and automated process, the person asks for it, presses a button, and it gets delivered to their device. You know, you go, and if we look at, you know, a handy, you know, mobile telephone, you go onto the apps catalog, you purchase, or most of the time you get them for free, the application, and it gets installed.
Yeah, I would say
it installs that on your phone for you. Not unless you're, you know, a grandmother and you're getting your your nephew to go and do it for you. Put the gardening magazine application on your tablet, but that should require no human intervention at all.
Okay, I would say that the principle is make it as specific as it possible. To have some service request form, submit something cannot be really specific and cannot be automated at the end, right? So
yeah,
just make sure that there is a list or something like that.
And ask the questions, you know. I would like X on my device. Well, you need to know, can you find out the name of that device automatically, or the user got to give you the name of the device? Do you already have that in your catalog, whatever that X is?
Good. Here is some kind of, it's not question exactly, it's probably the comment to my note that the expensive time of the agent, that I think there is only expensive from the customer, not the agent, and smile. Expensive time. So probably it's just the comment to my note that you can save some really expensive agent time. Okay, can you name a good example of the service request management which is provided for public in transportation, hospital, police?
Well, I mean, delivering applications onto your mobile devices. Uber's a very good example of a request where you request somebody to come and pick you up at a certain point and deliver you to somewhere else, or even all these apps that are around for ordering food, to be delivered to your home.
I now I will be a little bit bad for the public services in Slovakia. I have in mind hundreds of wrong service request management implementation, starting from the ordering to the vaccination, or ordering for these tests against COVID, right, or to prove the COVID. All these request forms were designed really awfully, and the processing process were really mess and even they lost the data of the requests, right? So, okay, I can give you plenty examples of not good examples of service requests management process in public organization, but I'm living in the wrong state to give a good example.
Oh, I think we're all living in the wrong state. In Germany, the vaccine process has not been smoothly handled. And in the United Kingdom, one of the things, well, two things that I can point to there, it's not really, it's about the public services not using technology as well as they could do. In the United Kingdom, they were recording all the tests that the laboratories were doing on Excel spreadsheets that were old versions of Excel, where the number of rows was insufficient to collate all the data together, and you had all the common the opinion journalists. Well, why are they using an old version of Excel? And I was thinking, why aren't they using a database? That's just insane, trying to track millions of tests on Excel.
Sure.
And
okay.
the other thing that I found quite shocking was there was some pictures of whiteboards in Downing Street, the head of the United Kingdom government, and they were using just simple whiteboards, not digitized boards. I mean, my wife, she works in a fee-paying school, so they've got quite a large budget, but all their display boards, they're all digitized, and so you can put a PowerPoint presentation up on it, you can write on it, you can then print off whatever you've written off that board. And there were these guys in 10 Downing Street running the whole of the United Kingdom using these ancient technology, whiteboards and marker pens that didn't even look like they didn't even have the spray to wipe off the marker pen from the board. So, the person who's saying, can you name a good example of service request management provided for the public? Well, not from government side, no, but certainly I think, these,
plenty of others, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of other. Yeah.
I'm afraid that we are run out of time.
Okay.
Okay, I read the last. It's not actually the question. It's like a comment. So let's move to the ending. First of all, I would like to thank you because it was really, from my side, really good, and thank you very much that you participate to the itSMF Slovakia webinar, and hopefully we will hear you soon to another possible webinar or another event which will be organized by itSMF Slovensko. Hopefully, maybe the next conference will be on premise, not online. So maybe we can hear you there, and maybe another option. Okay, good. What I made a promise to the itSMF Slovakia to promote the next webinar. It will be in Slovak language, so who is from another country probably won't be able to benefit or participate. It's about CMDB and real practice with the implementation. But hopefully some other webinars will be even again international. So thank you again, and well, what I say at the end, or you can say something, Robert.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to help co-present this presentation. It's been very interesting exercise, and I've enjoyed the questions that have come. They've all been very interesting and thought-provoking. And I think nothing more to say, but thank you very much to everybody who's attended, and thank you very much to the hosts, Ivo and Marty, and to yourself, Miro, for inviting me.
So thank you again, and have a nice day, all of you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.